Thanks for joining us this week on the show. You are here just in time for a fantastic conversation that I've had with Louis de Jaeger. He is releasing the book SOS Save Our Soils. He specializes in spreading the word on regenerative agriculture, how we can save our soil, literally the dirt that nourishes the food that we eat. His work is so important. His message is so inspiring. And as a farm girl myself, I think this is the conversation we all need to be having around the dinner table. So thank you for joining us this week.
It's time to flip the script on stress and learn how to thrive today and throughout your days. Join me for inspiration and interviews with folks who are shining their light in the world in the areas of positive mindset, health, and well-being. I'm your host, Susie Vine. Let's get happified.
Welcome back. I am so happy to have you with me today for a conversation that is near and dear to my heart. I am joined today by an earth-loving activist, Louis de Jaeger, an award-winning documentary filmmaker, author, and international keynote speaker. His landscape architecture firm, Commensalist, handles regeneration projects worldwide, from simple gardens to agricultural estates to private islands. He's a leading voice on climate change, regenerative agriculture, and landscape design. What sets him apart is his refusal to judge. Instead, he seeks understanding to build bridges between different worlds. And as I've already shared with Louis, as a farm girl myself growing up outside of a village of 800 people in central Illinois, this is a topic that I'm so passionate about, and I'm so grateful that we were connected. Thank you, Louis, for reaching out. I'm thrilled to help share the word of your book that is coming out this summer. And I know we're going to go off in a lot of different directions. So help us get started at the beginning. How did you take on this passion for helping to nourish our earth?
Well, as soon as I actually realized that whatever we do to our earth, we do to ourselves as human beings, that the soil is so much connected to our personal health, that every time we hurt our planet, we hurt ourselves literally. So it's actually a form of self-preservation that we need to preserve the earth. So even if you're like a super egoistic, you need to save the planet to save yourself. So that's, I think, a very primal thing to do. But also, secondly, because the earth is just so beautiful. I traveled through like half of all the United States, and it is such a rich place to see all these different landscapes, these beautiful rivers, the sunsets, the deserts, the mountains, Yellowstone National Park. It's just, we've been given such a beautiful present, such a crazy nice place to hang out. And it's like, well, let's be grateful for it and let's take care of it, right?
It is truly mind-boggling, and it's such a gift. And you were telling me you were able to spend time and travel around so much of the United States, which I wish more people from the US had the opportunity to do, to put a priority on that and to see this place where we live and to experience where food comes from as you travel through the heartland. And now you're back
Mhm.
home in Belgium. So, Europe also has very diverse climates, I feel like, from mountains to meadows to
Yeah,
forests, not as many desert areas, and hopefully those aren't growing at too much of a pace. But
they are, unfortunately. Yeah.
and I love what you're saying too about, to recognize the beauty and to love the planet, which is such a reflection of us, is such an important expression of taking care of ourselves. And I hope that people take that in. I have a feeling, we're really going to cover some more of that and give you more reasons to embrace that as we talk today. But I feel like it's become too easy for people to become completely separated from the source of what they're eating, where our
Mhm.
nourishment is actually coming from. How did you start to put these pieces together?
I think it's different things. On one hand, it's an intellectual thing. You're in a supermarket, you have two tomatoes in your hand. One tomato is organic, the other one is not organic, and you're wondering, okay, they pretty much look the same. Which one should I buy? And instinctively, you would buy an organic one because they are not sprayed with poison. And if you tell a small child, look, little boy or girl, which one do you want to eat? This one has been sprayed 7 times with really toxical substances. This one hasn't. Which one are you gonna choose? No child is gonna choose the poisoned one, but we are choosing that every day. But on the other hand, for example, when I was 18 years old, I was an idealist and I wanted to live organically. And I was traveling through all the United States, and I wanted to buy organic, but as an 18-year-old, I had a very tight budget. So I was then going to an organic store in Massachusetts, and when I looked at the prices, then it's like, oh my God, I have this budget of like 1 year of sabbatical, and if I'm gonna buy organic food, then the sabbatical is only gonna take 1 month. So then it was very heartbreaking for myself to then compromise and say, okay, I'm gonna buy some things organic and some things not organic. And that was also like a very frustrating thing that came on it. It's like, okay, it's actually not fair that only people in a certain income bracket are able not to be poisoned. So you need to have a certain amount of wealth to be able not to poison yourself. And so that was one of the first aha moments, just literally poisoning yourself. And the second thing is also, and then later on in life, is that I really tasted so much good food already. Tasted the difference between an organic tomato that's been grown by a farmer friend of mine, that just if you eat it, it's like your mouth explodes of lovely tastes. And sometimes if I buy a store-bought tomato that's like just coming from chemical agriculture, it almost hurts your teeth to eat it. And it sometimes like tastes like fish, or I don't know what it tastes like, but it tastes horrible. And so I think also a love for very good foods also points you in the direction of having a more regenerative way of eating.
Yes, I think that it's important to come back to that recognition, what real food tastes like, what garden fresh produce tastes like, because so much of our food supply has gone through such a journey to reach us,
Hmm.
then and we think, oh, but we're choosing to put vegetables on our plate, but it's so devoid or drained of the nutrients by the time they've traveled. And I recently had Dr. Ailey Cohen on my podcast. She published her book Detoxify, and we were
Hmm.
talking about that. We think that we have to only go for the gold standard, but there's a spectrum, and if you can find organic frozen produce, then that's often a more cost-effective way to get organic and preserve it for yourself. And we get into these lanes where we think, shopping organic means going to Whole Foods or Whole Paycheck, and it's prohibitive. And so we just talk ourselves out of the entire option or hope and
Hmm.
settle for lesser foods. And personally, and this could be a topic for another day altogether because they're all kind of deep and complex topics.
Hmm.
But here in the US, so much of what is grown that is available to the mass market is subsidized by the government. And so what we think is cheap is not really cheap. It's
That's
just
so
more
true.
available.
Yeah.
And so that's hard too, because you really have to educate yourself and go on this quest yourself and seek out the sources to get more whole foods, more natural, more nutrient dense foods. So it can be overwhelming. So I'm glad
Definitely.
that you're in this space. And your book coming out this summer is Save Our Soil.
Yes, exactly. SOS, Save Our Soils. And
SOS.
that's exactly the message that I want to send to the world is setting out an SOS. If, yes, saving our soils is the same as saving our souls. Um,
Mhm.
in order to save our own life, we have to save our own soils, and it's about the food we eat, but it's also about much more. Like I've seen a lot of nature disasters in my life, of like giant floods or hurricanes. Like I was flying over the Midwest not too long ago, and I saw like these huge strips of hurricanes coming through. It's really terrible to see that, but it all starts with a good soil. And actually the Americans, they know that. They've been there and they've done that with the dust bowl. They know what happens if you don't take care of the soil. Entire dust storms create kind of an apocalyptic scenario. And I was talking to a US farmer, and he said, Louis, when you put down a tree, you were sent to jail after the Dust Bowl because you knew that this tree stops the soil of eroding and of washing or flying away. And so we've been there. If we look at history, we know we have to do that. And right now, dust bowls are coming back because we kind of have a short-term memory. And so if we don't take notice, then that will happen. Droughts are happening. And what's a drought? You could say that's not enough water, but you could also say it's not enough fungi because a plant root can also only go so far, but a plant root can become friends with an underground fungi that makes their root 100 times longer. That's like crazy. That's like me sitting here, I'm thirsty and I want to get a drink and I can make my arm 100 times longer to get something from my fridge. Would be amazing. But these plants, they can do that if we only let them. And that's also like food security. A lot of people nowadays are very much concerned about security and defense. And I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% into defense. We need to invest in defense, and the best defense we have is a good soil that will make sure we have a good food safety, that in case
Mm.
that shit hits the fan, that we will have food. And right now, if your soil is depleted and you don't have artificial chemicals to put in, then you're really screwed, basically.
Truly. And it was no coincidence, I am sure, that within the week of you reaching out to me and sharing about your upcoming book, I had just heard about dust storms that swept through my hometown. You know, I saw pictures in Normal, Illinois, which when you grow up outside of Normal, it doesn't seem like a joke, but now there's so many jokes that come from being Normal, Illinois, all the way up through Chicago. So about 200 miles apart, these dust storms swept through. We are
Crazy.
in these times again. And so
Yeah.
I was ranting at my husband, which doesn't do him any good, but raise our stress levels. And when you
Yeah.
reached out, I said, I'm so grateful I can bring this conversation because
Mm.
we are still learning these lessons. And that breaks my heart. I grew up surrounded by fields in
Mm.
the 90s, in the 80s and into the 90s, as Monsanto was refining the Roundup and Roundup ready crops, and they were spraying crops from planes around my home. And now that I have left, and correlation is not causation, but there are too many
Mm-hmm.
coincidences to chalk these things up. The rates of autoimmune disease, of arthritis, of situations that I hear from people who I knew back home, who stayed at home, who continued living with standard, mass produced agriculture, it's devastating to me. And so I'm passionate about shining a light on work like yours, where you're helping people understand that we can get back to our regenerative roots. We can bring the life back to our soil. And that doesn't mean that we're limiting the food that's available to people. I think we might
No,
even have more food available. Help me debunk this myth.
definitely. I'm really happy you're bringing that up because we are confronted with a lot of doom and gloom stories. We're telling them right now, and it is scary, and it also scares me. I'm a super optimistic person, but if I hear the stories, for example, that you're telling, the dust bowl is coming back, it's pretty scary. But the good news is, there's also good news, is that there are so many farmers showing that it's possible to have a very good income, have a good yield while taking care of the soil by working together with nature instead of fighting against it. And it's on the one hand like an eco-friendly thing to do, but on the other hand, it's also a super capitalistic thing to do as a farmer because why pay for it if you can get it for free? If you work together with natural pest control and you have these hedges full of good guys ready to eat the bad guys, then you don't have to spray pesticides. Pesticides are super expensive. So even if you don't care about the environment and only care about your wallet, y- that's the way to go. Regenerative organic farming. And the nice thing is that farmers from all across the world, all across the United States, are showing these beautiful examples of cooling down their own microclimate. They literally make it rain again. Their soils are full of life again and act like sponges. So if it floods around their fields, it doesn't flood in their fields because the carbon content is just so high right now that if it rains, it just infiltrates and the soil keeps the water longer. So if there's a dry period, those farmers are not affected. I know farmers that have not watered for the last 20 years just because they've taken care of the soil. Then you can say, well, he's a very big nature lover, but he's also just like taking care of his assets. And I think the moment people realize that taking care of the earth is taking care of yourself, but also for your wallet, then there is nobody that could be against it, except of course people making money of farms being in a bad shape, which is unfortunately the case right now.
Exactly, exactly. Something that I learned years ago that I found so devastating is the farmers who do subscribe to the more widespread forms of agriculture using pesticides and then having that pesticide resistant crop, there's genetic markers because it has been genetically modified. And when those markers are found in fields of farmers who are trying to use traditional methods, trying to heal the soil, they're actually being prosecuted by the manufacturers saying, you're not paying us rights to grow our crop in your fields. And these farmers are devastated. First of all, they can't say they have organic or naturally grown crops anymore. So
Yeah.
it's destroying their business, but they're being prosecuted and repressed while they're trying to do what really comes naturally, what generations of farmers and
Hmm.
stewards of the land have done, which is to notice how the soil is behaving, to notice that we shouldn't be having drought in April in the Midwest, And there's an
So
argument,
true.
again, another show, I'm sure, whether climate change is real or not, but there's no refuting that the temperature is rising. And whether or not we started this spiral, we don't have to help it. And so when you talk about farmers using these regenerative practices and noticing these microclimates, the weather is more mild there and it
Hmm.
retains moisture. I mean, that just gives me so much hope to see that these are demonstrable benefits from these
Yeah.
practices.
And those are the things that we need to focus on. And that's, like you say, it gives hope and it also gives inspiration because the farmers you're talking about who are still locked in the old paradigm, who are still subscribed to the big ag way of doing things, sometimes they're really also just stuck and they have a hard time getting out of it. So it's like when I was 19 years old, I was pretty extreme and I was angry at them. But the more I talked to those farmers and also became friends with them, I realized that they are just trying to survive as well. They're like, they get so little money for their produce. They have to work so hard. They have to send their kids to schools. So they're really doing their best. And for them to make a transition, it's not easy for them to do. It's a reason that they need to stick to their old things because they know, well, look, it always worked. So it will probably work as well in the future. We can't take risks because if I only have a couple of tons of yield less, then I won't make any money this year and I will go bankrupt. And what then would have to do with my wife and my three kids? And that's a situation a lot of these farmers are in. So being angry is like really not a part of the solution. But what is a part of the solution is talking to them and saying, look, I know somebody who has been literally in your shoes. His name is Mike. He lives there. Have a talk with him because he managed to get out and he's actually making more profit right now. He only spends half the amount of diesel and half the amount of pesticides because he's done certain things or plowed less or he's been using cover crops now or he installed hedgerows to stop erosion and he saved a lot of money, he saves a lot of time, he has more time with his family and friends. He has also less headaches and diarrhea because a lot of farmers, every time they spray, they don't feel very well. So it's not good for their health. So it's actually super hopeful to see these beautiful inspirational places. And a farmer is also only convinced if he sees another farmer doing it. And that's also something that we as consumers also can play a big role in because it's maybe a bit harsh to say, but if you buy a non-organic product, certainly you're supporting a system in which you actually poison that farmer because that farmer is spraying and is inhaling chemical substances for you. So every time you buy a non-organic carrot, you're actually poisoning that farmer and the wife of the farmer and the kids playing around in those fields. And you were saying that there are a lot of correlations, but there are also a lot of scientific studies that actually show on black on white that fertility in males really gone down drastically when they're exposed to pesticides. When women are exposed to pesticides during pregnancy, the chance to get a spontaneous abortion goes up much higher. The same with genetical defects and even genital defects of little sons that are born is much higher if you don't eat organic food. And the list is long of scientific studies that really show that if you want to get pregnant, if you want to have a healthy baby, you should eat organic. At least like even if you don't eat organic for your entire life, do it while you're pregnant or the 9 months before you get pregnant. And not only the women, because it also the men also has a part to play. Their seed need to be of good quality as well. And for that, healthy food is super important. And there are a lot of studies now showing that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing and maybe a little bit painful. It's painful for me to hear. I'm in this situation where I don't have the budget that I would love to have to eat only organic. But what you're saying is so true. Until the market completely is able to change over to this kind of agriculture to support organic farming, and that becomes, right, common agriculture,
Yeah.
common practice. We keep perpetuating these patterns. We keep putting these farmers in these situations. And it's devastating, and I've seen other impacts as well. When you think about it, our gut microbiome is such big news these days. The
Hmm.
bacteria in our gut, it's important for our brain health, for our hormone balance, for so many different things. And when you think about the bugs in our gut, the bugs in our soil, we're stripping everything with
Yeah.
the standard agriculture practices right now. So, as I already mentioned, autoimmune diseases are on the high. My conversation with Ailey is a great one if you're
Mm.
curious about that connection. And so, all the changes that we can make are really helpful. And one of the other things that you brought to my attention, and I'd love to kind of dive into a little bit while we're talking today, in terms of ways agroforestry, which is just a delicious word. I want to get
Hmm.
into food forests too, if we can, before we're done today,
Oh, yeah.
and
My
food
favorite topic.
self-sufficiency, right? How do those help to foster resilience in our communities as well as individually?
Yeah, that's a super important question. And let's go back also to the history of the United States, to the Native Americans who actually, a lot of them survived on chestnuts. And I heard a story of them harvesting the chestnuts to eat, but also a lot of them harvested acorns. And that's a super interesting one because a lot of people don't know that acorns are perfectly edible. And so the only thing is, if you just eat them like that, they're full of tannins, which are poisonous, and you need to wash out those tannins. So what do? They build giant nets, put all these acorns in these nets, and put them in rivers, and then the rivers washed away all the poisonous substances, all the tannins. And I heard like these stories of rivers turning brown because of all this. And like all throughout the United States, acorns have been so important as a survival food. And that's something that really struck to me. Also, when I was an intern at the farm, I was harvesting leek at -2 degrees Celsius, so freezing temperatures. I don't know how much Fahrenheit that is, sorry. And then I realized that, okay, now when this leek is harvested, nothing is left. The leek won't come back naturally. You have to replant it yourself because it's an annual. And annual plants are plants that only live 1 year. And if you have a vegetable garden, you know what annuals are. And when you harvest everything, it won't come back and you need to start over again year after year. And it's very tiresome, actually. And if you then look at nature, because we really have to learn from nature, if you observe, then we see that in nature, annuals only exist on disturbed soils. After there's been a disaster, annuals come in to colonize bare ground, and then the perennials, or the plants that live longer than 1 year, take over, and then the annuals disappear. So if you actually study your diet, or the diet that's almost all Americans or Europeans are eating, then you see that it's like almost entirely based of annuals. So in order to sustain that diet, you have to keep on disturbing the soil. And that's what, for example, the United Nations, they predict that in 2050, that's only in less than 25 years, 90%, 90% will be degraded of all the lands. And if that's the case, then we are not going to be able to eat our iPhones or our Teslas. We still need food. And for that, one of the biggest reasons is the annual agriculture we use. We keep on disturbing the soil. If you look at perennials, one of my favorite examples is an old chestnut tree in Europe that is supposed to be around 4,000 years old. Which really amazes me. There's a lot of discussion about the exact age, but it's thousands years old. I was thinking, like, okay, let's say I would want to become a farmer. What am I gonna do? Am I gonna harvest leek every year in freezing temperatures, replant it, and really like toil the soil? It's such a hard work. Or am I just gonna sit under that chestnut tree and just wait 4,000 years, and every year the chestnut will fall on my lap? Don't have to do anything. And of course, it's a bit an exaggeration because if you have a chestnut orchard, there's still a lot of work. But there's a lot of logic to it, this perennial agriculture. You only have to plant once, and they'll root much deeper. So if there's a big drought or if there's a big flood, these trees, they will survive, while annual plants like grains or cereals or corn, they will just wash away because their roots are like super tiny, petite roots of trees. They're like, bam, super sturdy. And for that, it's way more logic if we want a more secure food system, that we have more perennials, more trees, but also more other perennials that you might or might not know. Rhubarb, for example, is a perennial that a lot of people know. Asparagus, the same. It comes back every year. And it's also a way to be a lazy gardener if you have a garden. You just plant it once, and then you can pick raspberries every year again. You don't have to do a lot of work. And I travel a lot to give keynotes or film documentaries or go to clients across the world to design landscapes. So I'm not a lot at home as well. So I'm happy to go home and then know that, okay, my trees or my bushes, my shrubs full of berries, but even if I'm away, they will survive. I'm that kind of parent to my garden. And that's just such a nice feeling to know that I truly believe that we need to eat more trees.
I've been wanting to know about this. So, Eat More Trees, this is the name of your documentary that you were here in the US, traveling around a bit, back through the heartland,
Hmm.
working on this production. Love to know where we can find it, but also beyond chestnuts, walnuts, almonds, the trees that we think of producing fruit. Where are you suggesting we go with this? The Eat More Trees.
Yeah, well, the nice thing is America is one of the pioneers in that, and to be more precise, Kansas. In Kansas, in Salina, west of Kansas City, you have this research center that a professor or a researcher started more than 50 years ago. Wes Jackson is his name. He started the Land Institute, and for the last 50 years, he has been perennializing. So like cereals or grains, normally after you harvest them, they're dead and you need to replant them. But Kansas, they have very dry conditions and it's hard sometimes to germinate as a plant. But the perennial grain they created, they actually, once they're planted, you can harvest for about 5 years, and they keep on coming back year after year. So it's a huge win, and it's actually nice. I have a little box of those seeds with me right now. Gonna quickly show you. So I'm not sure if you can see them, maybe a little bit.
Little bit.
They're much smaller than normal grains, so they're still being crossbred. And he says he's now like almost 90 years old, this guy, and he says, well, it's probably gonna take a couple of decades more to make them even more yielding. But right now, they're also already making interesting products out of them. The commercial name of these grains is Kernza, and they are making Kernza whiskey, Kernza cornflakes, Kernza bread, pancakes, cookies, and
Oh,
I've
I love
tasted
it.
even Kernza beer. Like Patagonia made a special beer out of Kernza, and all these products are super delicious. And they're now also doing it with sunflowers. So it's super promising. They've also done it with rice. And while Kernza, the yields is not as high as cereals in normal conditions, in dry conditions, they can beat the natural cereals because natural cereals will just die in the drought and they won't. But on healthier conditions, they're not very competitive. But the rice they created, you plant it once, you can harvest for 3 to 5 years, and they have exactly the same yields, but you only have to plant them once every 5 years instead of once year after year. So imagine what that does to your family of having extra time. Imagine what it does to your soil. And that really is the future. And you were talking earlier about will we have more food? The answer is yes. We are so limited right now. If you go to the supermarket, you only have so many fruits and vegetables, and it's almost all the same. But in reality, we have thousands of varieties. And it's just amazing, all these different tastes. It's like going on a journey through the world by having all these different tastes, and they don't even need to be exotic. These are vegetables that you can grow wherever you live, and it's just such an abundance that's out there. But if people don't know, they can't love it. So we need to put it more in the picture and show them, look, this is a vegetable that you can grow and it's just so good. And then hopefully it will be commercialized one day and you'll be just able to buy it in the Walmart or in any supermarket or local farmer market you want.
And I think, as you're describing this, I think it's really important to kind of debunk a myth or a common conception that all genetic modification is bad. Because we have been cross pollinating and hybridizing plants since we stopped being hunters and gatherers. And basically, genetic modification became a shorthand for treated with pesticides. But there's so much more to it. So if you're looking for, an alternative for organic and you're trying to avoid pesticides, then you can look for GMO Project Verified. And that's great. And I love that you're shining a light on these technological advances in working with cereal grains to help them have this longevity to turn annuals into perennials. It takes some adaptation over time. Not all modification is bad. It's just really the question is what's the motive in changing, in trying to steer these genes towards new traits, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's true what you say. People have been crossbreeding plants millennia, and I'm super glad they did. Otherwise, we'd have fruits and vegetables that would taste like nothing, or they would taste too strong, would be bitter. Look at the big fresh apples we have, or the cœur de bœuf tomatoes, these giant tomatoes full of tastes, and it's all because we just cross-pollinated the different seeds with each other. And there's also a big difference with GMO crops or just crossbred crops. To give you a beautiful example, the Land Institute, I asked them, well, would it make sense for you to use genetically modification? And they say, well, GMO, it's a tool to get somewhere, but in this case, it will take as long to do it with GMO methods as if you would just crossbreed it. And most of the time, you actually don't need GMOs. So, genetically modifying, first and for all, it's super expensive to do so because it takes a lot of lab work and it takes a lot of certification processes. So, it's only the very big guys that can do it. But most of the time, it's really not necessary to do it. So to create new varieties, new crops, the normal way of just crossbreeding, like they've been doing for the last hundreds of or thousands of years, is actually still a very pretty good way to do it, to get new varieties and better varieties. Because with GMO crops, there are also some risks involved that you don't know, do not always have the desired outcome, and you have more control when you crossbreed normally. So most of the cases, it's always you have to look at what really is the problem. And a lot of the times, for example, with GMOs, they say, well, we have a problem because we have bad soils. We need to create a crop that's resistant against bad soils. Then I'm like, look, this is total bullshit. We just need better soils. We need to take care of the soils, and then we don't need your expensive GMO crops. Because that's also another thing. GMO crops are just freaking expensive. And it's like you said, farmers have to have a subscription to those seeds. They can't reuse them or resow them or save the seeds. No, they're trapped in this subscription for seeds. Instead, the only thing we actually need to do is take care of the soil, and then most of the time, it doesn't even make sense to have GMOs.
It's just that transition period that's the scary part.
Very scary. And that's something that we as a society need to invest in. Like we always say, and mostly Americans are proud and say, yeah, we want as little government interference as possible. But still, we depend on government interference for making our food so cheap. And if our food wouldn't be so cheap, we would protest. So we're kind of happy with government interference on that one. So we just need to, that stream of money pointed in the right direction. And it's true that if you can actually compare our fields to drug addicts. We like killed all the life in the fields, and we have to add fertilizer to it because the fields are dead. We killed them. Dead fields with bad food will raise sick children. So the plants are pretty sick, and sick animals or sick people or sick plants get attacked much easier. So if they're then attacked, then companies come and sell you pesticides to kill those attackers, and you go in this vicious circle because you kill the soil even more, and then even more fertilizers, and it's a vicious circle, and it's horrible for the farmer but super good for the businesses selling all these chemicals, of course. But we can get out of this vicious circle. But it's like with a drug addict, you can't just take away the drugs, you need to send the drug addict to a rehab, and little by little rehabilitate yourself and try to become free of these substances. And so it takes a couple of years. And during those years of rehab, the soils will produce less food, so less yield, so less income. And that's something that farmers mostly cannot survive. And that's what they call a yield gap, because they have a gap in the yield. And we need a way to bridge that gap. And that is, for example, something that the government could help, and to
Mhm.
help to bridge that yield gap.
Oh, that's so powerful. Yeah, I think that's really getting right down to the heart of the matter. And I just want to say briefly, I'll never say beefsteak tomato the same way again. Coeur de boeuf tomato. That's new in my lexicon. Thank you.
Voilà.
Thank you very much. Um, but that's putting the attention where it needs to be. And we seem to be allergic. I'm going to blame us in the US, but in general, in these times, we seem to really struggle with the investment in infrastructure, making it through that transition, recognizing it's not going to be an easy process and not hoping for instant gratification, but understanding that the payoff is worth
Yeah.
the deficit that we have to face on the front end and being able to support farmers through this. I mean, as we've been talking, I've been thinking about other, little data bites that float around in my head because I've been watching this situation from afar for a long time. And these tractors cost, if not tens, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. The
Mm-hmm.
amount of debt that a typical American farm might be carrying is
Oh, it's
staggering.
incredible.
So to even think about, as you've already mentioned, to change the way that my father taught me to do it because his grandfather taught him to do it because this was the next best thing, you know, is really, and you run the risk of becoming the black sheep in your community to be the one to
Definitely.
turn the tide.
It
And so
happens.
it's such a contentious debate. And another thing that I like to take a look at, while we're here, how do you see that we can change like that collective perception and mindset so that it's easier, so that these farmers who are ready to make a change don't feel like they're standing against this tide?
Yeah, very good question. The thing is that actually one of the things I love the most about America is the value of freedom. I think that's probably one of the biggest values that you have, right? Am I correct?
I think
Yeah.
you're right about that one.
Freedom, and you feel it everywhere you go. I feel it when I drive the car through like desolate highways, seeing the landscapes, but also seeing mom and pop diners at the side of the street, people like living their dream. They have this ideal of having freedom. I'm really attracted to that vision. That's also what I love so much about your country. And actually, all of that is an investment in that freedom. If you look at the highway system, it has been built by the government to invest in our freedom, the freedom to drive our beloved cars in the US from one place to another. That's an investment in our freedom. And the thing is, if we don't invest in agriculture and invest in our farmers, we'll have bad quality food, we'll get sick. And if you're sick, you're not free. If you can't get out of your bed or if you need surgeries, you have to pay a lot of money to treat your sickness. It's, it works counter to your freedom. If you're broke, you can't be free. You can't have freedom. If you have a dust bowl like destroying your entire garden and house, you're not free. You have to get out and you have to clean up your porch or clean up your kitchen if like a flood destroyed all your appliances because farm above on the hill plowed too much and now all his soil washed in your living room. That's not freedom. So I think we just have to frame it in that way because it is nothing more and nothing less than freedom. I think that's this really drive to that freedom. But we can't be free on a dead planet. We can't be free on poisoned food. We just can't. So that's just the investment we need to keep our freedom. It's as simple as that.
I love it. I feel like that's a message people can really take to heart too. Because freedom can be used to further different people's opinions or talking points, but fundamentally, on the individual level, where do we all savor that right to freedom? Where do we want to feel free and being able to express ourselves and being able to choose food that nourishes our bodies and being able to feed our families food that isn't going to cause chronic illness in so many different facets. So I like that. I think that's something we can hold on to.
Yeah, there's not a lot of freedom on your toilet seat.
No, no, no. And there was not this prevalence of irritable bowel syndrome and digestive disorders. And of course, stress plays a part in that. And I've talked about that before too, but it's all connected. It's all connected. And I think, and perhaps in your journey, you have seen this too. One little moment of discovery, one kernel in what we're saying today, one spark that people can take with them and just explore that, fan that little spark, and see what else it throws light on. Because I believe that that starts a cascade of change for the better as we start to regard our soil as a living thing, as we start to regard the hands that brought this food to the store so we can bring it home. As all of this starts to bring us back into that connection, and isolation is our current pandemic. It's so much easier to be isolated and live in our own vacuum of thoughts where we're never wrong and we're never challenged. So
Yeah.
I think shining these lights is so essential.
Really true. And that's actually a point that I really love. We have to look at the things that unite us, that unite human beings. And for me, I'm in a privileged situation that I have clients all across the world, the landscapes we can design, and we have billionaires as clients, but we also have people with very little income. We have people on the right side of the of politics, on the left side, and everything in between. And the thing that they all have in common is, what do we say to each other at Happy New Year? What do we wish each other? We
Health
wish
and happiness.
we wish each other a good health. If we raise our glasses, we say cheers or prosit, any other word that mostly means to a good health.
Mm.
And for all these clients that I see that I have a good connection with, they all care about their children. They want their children to have a good future. There's nobody in this world gonna argue about that, no matter if they're rich or poor, left or right, or what kind of ideologies they have. They all just want a good future for their children. And if you put health at the center of this discussion, and what is health? Health is freedom, like we just talked about before. Then that just makes every discussion sometimes even obsolete because if and I think like one of the things that give me the biggest spark of all is that once that I realized that we as human beings actually consist of more non-human cells than human cells, that just blew my mind the first time I heard that we actually are not even really humans. We're just like vehicles, but we're like transporting a gazillion of microorganisms, of bacteria, of fungi. And these little guys, these little fellas are the ones that actually are keeping us healthy. So every time we eat food, they are the ones that will get all the iron out of our broccolis, or will get the B12 out of our food and make it so our body can take it in, but also they're the ones protecting us. If you look at our gut, they actually have perforated, they have little holes, our guts. It's natural. And these holes need to be protected of intruders. It's also bacteria that are like fighting bad guys if they are coming through. But if we eat too clean, if we put too much hand sanitizer on, if we put too much pesticides on our food, then they will just kill all these good guys in our guts. And then we have these little holes not protected anymore. So you'll have little leaks and then you'll have a leaky gut. And that's how chronic diseases start. And currently they're really on the rise in the developed world, which is like crazy because we've never been so rich as ever. We've never eaten so much as before, but still we're getting chronic diseases. There is something going on, and that is we're not taking care of our little guys here in our gut microbiome. And it's to make us healthy, but also to make us happy. Like 90% of our serotonin, that's our happiness hormone, 90%, it's created in our human guts. So if we eat shitty food, then our gut will be shitty too, and it won't produce that happiness hormone, and then you won't be happy. It's as simple as that. And there's also like a lot of studies being done on the connection to our brain and our gut, the brain gut axis, and they're super connected to each other. There's also a reason why they say follow your gut feeling. You actually also think with your gut. It's been proven that we think with our gut, also with our mind, of course, and also sometimes with other body parts, but mostly with our gut as well. And if we screw up this balance in our gut and we become uneased or dizzy, we get disease, and a lot of depressions actually also stem from a bad gut. And where do these little creatures come from if you want to replenish it again? Well, you could drink these probiotic yogurts, they'll probably do something, but the biggest source of all these microorganisms are actually fruits and vegetables that are full of these microorganisms, as long as we don't nuke them out with pesticides and chemical fertilizers, of course. So that's, of course, the big thing. And that brings us to a fantastic quote that I really love, and that is, your food will be your medicine,
Mm.
or your medicine will be your food. The choice is up to you.
Ooh, there was a lot. I'm so glad that's recorded so folks can rewind and listen to that because you just put so much in that little summary. And I wish we could go on for hours because clearly you and I could. We'll have to connect on one of our journeys. I know we'll end up in each other's neighborhood someday.
Definitely.
People will learn more about this in your book. Do you get into this in Save Our
Yeah.
Soil?
And the thing is, there is already some nice scientific literature that's unreadable for most folks. So I really wrote it down as I would speak, just very simple language, so even a 12-year-old can understand it. Because I think it was Einstein that said it, that if you can't explain a thing simple, you don't understand it. So it's actually pretty simple, all the things, but you have to get it. And for that, I've included a lot of stories with farmers who are super interesting. I make analogies to make sure that you really understand the things. And one of the most maybe a funny thing, like like I was having a lot of discussions with people, and sometimes I couldn't find the right arguments to win discussion. So that was my ego playing along, obviously. And so that's also one of the reasons I wrote that book. Ego driven. It's like, okay, this is like the manual to win every discussion. That was also part of my goal, just because I was frustrated that I couldn't win all discussions. So it's also really a book that's, look, if you've read it and it's easy to read, fast to read, you can go on the street and like really protest or be an activist or just talk to your family and friends and know what you're talking about, because there are a lot of things actually that you really need to hear and maybe read or reread. And if you can talk about these arguments, and it makes a lot more sense for yourself, but also if you're in a discussion with somebody.
We all need that kind of ammunition. So I'll have a link in the show notes where people can connect with you and find the book and hopefully links to be able to
Perfect.
stream or find viewings of Eat More Trees.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, can you tell folks your website or where's a good place to connect with you
Yeah,
online?
definitely. You can go to my website. It's just Louis DJ, like I'm not a DJ, it's just my last name, louisdj.com. And the book you can just buy it on Amazon. Just SOS Save Our Soils, not our souls, but soils. If you just put it on Amazon, then you'll find the book and have it shipped to you super fast.
And let this be the dinner table conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And let me know how those dinner conversations went. Always super curious if the arguments in the book provided will help or not.
Well, I'm so grateful to you and your work and your attitude of positivity, of hope. I think this is the conversation we need to be having. So thank you so much for your time and joining me. And I look forward to watching what comes next.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's meeting you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. You'll find all the resources we discussed today online at happifiedlife.com, along with links to subscribe to Happified on your favorite player and a handy search tool so you can search all of our previous episodes. Help us grow by leaving a quick review and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, keep on shining.